The wild A woman caught committing adultery might be paraded through the streets wearing a scarlet letter A to symbolize her infidelity. Similarly, women accused of theft or engaging in sex work could be made to wear signs with their alleged transgressions. Branding was an exceptionally cruel and dehumanizing punishment inflicted upon women during the Wild West. Women convicted of crimes such as theft or prostitution might have their bodies branded with hot irons, leaving permanent marks. This practice aimed to stigmatize and ostracize these women from society, making it nearly impossible for them to reintegrate or lead a normal life. The branding process was often painful and dangerous, with a red-hot iron pressed against the flesh, leaving a visible and lasting mark of their supposed wrongdoing. Whipping was a brutal and physically damaging punishment commonly inflicted upon women in the Wild West. Women found guilty of various offenses ranging from adultery to insubordination could face public flogging. This punishment involved being lashed with a whip, causing intense pain, physical trauma, and often leaving scars that served as a constant reminder of their punishment. The severity of the whipping varied, with some women enduring dozens or even hundreds of lashes, which could result in severe injury or even death. Torture devices. Torture devices were frequently employed as a means of punishment for women during the Wild West. The pillory was one such device, consisting of a wooden framework that confined a person's head and hands. Women would be locked into the pillory, exposed to public ridicule, and vulnerable to physical abuse from onlookers who could throw objects or verbally assault them. The stocks, another commonly used device, restrained women's feet and sometimes their hands, leaving them exposed and defenseless against verbal and physical abuse from the community. Solitary confinement, although not exclusive to women, was a psychologically damaging punishment commonly used during the Wild West. Women found guilty of crimes or deemed a threat to society were locked away in small, cramped cells with minimal light and ventilation. They would spend days, weeks, or even months isolated from human contact, resulting in severe psychological distress. The effects of prolonged isolation and sensory deprivation often included anxiety, depression, hallucinations, and other lasting mental health issues. Forced labor was a form of punishment used to penalize women and exploit their labor for the benefit of the community. Women convicted of crimes or deemed disruptive to society were assigned hard manual labor tasks. They might be forced to break rocks, dig ditches, perform grueling farm work, or engage in other physically demanding tasks under harsh conditions. This punishment not only served as a means of retribution, but also as a means of utilizing women's labor without compensation, further perpetuating their subjugation and exploitation. Ducking stool. The ducking stool, also known as the cucking stool, was a punishment primarily used for women accused of witchcraft or gossiping during the Wild West. The accused woman would be secured to a chair or a plank and repeatedly submerged in a body of water, such as a river or a pond. This punishment aimed to humiliate and silence women by associating them with witchcraft or promoting disruptive behavior. For example, a woman suspected of spreading malicious gossip might be subjected to the ducking stool, with the community believing that the water would cleanse her of her supposed sins and force her into submission. Sexual violence. The lawlessness of the frontier and the absence of effective law enforcement exposed women to significant risks of sexual violence. Women were particularly vulnerable when traveling alone or residing in remote areas. Outlaws, bandits, or even opportunistic individuals took advantage of the circumstances, subjecting women to sexual assaults, rape, or abduction. The prevailing culture of machismo and the perception of women as property further contributed to a climate where sexual violence could occur with impunity, leaving women in constant fear for their safety. For example, stagecoach robberies sometimes escalated into assaults against women passengers, and settlers on isolated homesteads were at risk of sexual assault by marauding bands. The prevalence of firearms and the lack of effective legal mechanisms made it challenging for women to protect themselves from such acts of violence. Forced sterilization. In some cases, women in the Wild West were subjected to forced sterilization as a disturbing form of punishment. Women who were deemed unfit to bear children due to their criminal records, perceived mental instability, or engagement in sex work were forcibly sterilized without their consent. This violation of bodily autonomy and reproductive rights was a particularly cruel punishment inflicted upon women. For instance, a woman who had a history of sex work might be forcibly sterilized under the premise that it would prevent her from continuing her supposed immoral lifestyle and protect society from the potential corruption caused by her offspring. Social isolation. Women who migrated to remote areas or frontier towns during the Wild West era often experienced profound social isolation. The scarcity of female companionship and support networks made it challenging for women to establish meaningful connections and form friendships. The predominantly male-dominated society further compounded their isolation, as they were often excluded from social events or discussions. The lack of emotional support and camaraderie left these women feeling lonely and disconnected, exacerbating the difficulties they faced and hindering their ability to seek assistance or find solace in shared experiences. For example, in mining camps or cattle towns, women were significantly outnumbered by men, leaving them isolated and excluded from social events or discussions. Lack of education. Educational opportunities for women were limited during the Wild West era. Many girls received minimal formal education, as the prevailing belief was that their primary role was to become wives and mothers. Access to schools was often restricted, and even when available, the curriculum and resources for girls were limited compared to those provided to boys. This lack of educational opportunities denied women the chance to develop their intellectual abilities and restricted their personal and professional growth. It perpetuated a cycle of limited opportunities and reinforced gender inequalities within society. Gender inequality. Women in the Wild West faced systemic gender inequality. They had limited rights and were often excluded from decision-making processes or positions of authority. The prevailing belief was that women were inherently inferior to men, leading to significant disparities in power, influence, and opportunities. This gender inequality permeated various aspects of women's lives, from their legal status to their ability to own property, pursue education, or participate in public life. The unequal power dynamics resulted in societal structures that restricted women's agency and perpetuated their subjugation.
Burnings. In extreme cases, women were subjected to burnings as a horrifying form of punishment during the Wild West. Women accused of crimes such as witchcraft, arson, or even murder would be tied to stakes or pyres and publicly set on fire. These gruesome executions were intended to instill fear in the community and assert control over women by associating them with demonic or malevolent forces. For instance, a woman accused of being a witch might be burned at the stake in a public square, with her tormentors believing that her execution would rid the community of her supposed evil influence. Burning involved tying the victim to a stake or post and setting them on fire, often in front of other captives or members of the tribe. The Apache were known for using slow-burning fires, which caused the victim to suffer intense pain and agony over a prolonged period of time. They also used torture fires, which were designed to maximize pain and suffering by heating up metal objects, such as branding irons, and then pressing them against the victim's skin. Let us tell you that the purpose of burning was not just to inflict physical pain, but also to humiliate and degrade the victim. Forced marriage was a disturbing punishment inflicted upon women who violated societal norms in the Wild West. Women who engaged in premarital sex, had relationships with individuals deemed unsuitable by their families or communities, or challenged traditional gender roles were forcibly married against their will. This punishment aimed to control women's choices, restrict their autonomy, and enforce societal expectations.
Judgment and scorn from others, enduring a constant reminder of their transgressions. For instance, women accused of adultery or engaging in premarital sex were shunned by their communities, labeled as fallen women, and subjected to public humiliation. They were often isolated from their families and faced significant challenges in rebuilding their lives due to the pervasive gossip and reputational damage inflicted upon them. It is crucial to acknowledge that these punishments were not widespread or universally applied, but rather represent extreme cases that occurred during the Wild West era. These practices reflect the social and cultural attitudes of the time, which were often unfair and oppressive towards women. Understanding and discussing these historical realities help shed light on the struggles and challenges faced by women during that era, while emphasizing the progress that has been made in promoting gender equality and human rights since then. So, what are your thoughts on the pace of progress that has been achieved apropos women's rights?
Diverse weaponry in all its forms laid the foundation for this fascinating epoch. Most individuals are unaware of some of these weapons of survival and defense. These 10 rare Western weapons are ones you've probably never heard of. Let's dive in. Apache revolver. The Apache revolver, despite its name, is not directly related to the Apache Native American tribes. This strange weapon was developed in a remote region of the planet. It is a unique, multifunctional weapon that thrived in secrecy throughout the late 19th century in France. Its clever construction included a knife, combining a revolver and a brass knuckle into one little package. Its roots can be found in the storied criminal underworld of Paris. In a risky urban environment, a multi-purpose tool would be suitable for a wide range of demands. The Les Apaches gang, which terrorized Parisian streets during the Belle Époque era, is credited with popularizing the handgun. Therefore, the name Apache revolver. The Apache revolver could be fired like a handgun and had a foldable 6-shot pin-fire cylinder. However, the revolver's lack of a barrel limited its accuracy and power, making it more suitable for close-quarters combat than for regular shooting encounters. The revolver's body had a 3-inch-long folding knife blade attached to it. The knife provided the user with an additional protective option, despite not being of high quality. Instead of the quality of the blade itself, its compactness was the main selling factor. The brass knuckle, which was shaped like a knuckle duster and served as the gun's grip when firing or using the knife, was the Apache revolver's third component. It was a potent close combat weapon as well. The Apache revolver was neither an elegant nor a powerful long-range weapon due to its peculiar combination of equipment. Instead, it was a practical and adaptable weapon ideal for the dangerously unclean streets of Paris or any other chaotic environment. Pepperbox revolver. It is impossible to exaggerate the importance of the pepperbox revolver in the history of multiple-shot weapons in the American West. This unique weapon, which was differentiated by its numerous barrels arranged in a circle, served as a precursor to the modern revolver and was significant to the development of handguns in the mid-19th century. The pepperbox revolver sports an eye-catching appearance in place of a typical revolver's single barrel and rotating cylinder. The pepperbox typically featured 6 barrels. These barrels were arranged in a circle, with each one holding a single cartridge, giving the weapon its recognizable pepperbox or grinder appearance. Every time the trigger was pulled on the pepperbox revolver, the barrel cluster would revolve, lining up a loaded barrel with the hammer. That ignited the powder and fired the cartridge when it hit the percussion cap. The user was able to shoot many rounds without needing to reload thanks to this. Greener light harpoon. Gun cowboys, outlaws, and vast desolate vistas weren't the only features of the Wild West. Along the western shores, a new frontier emerged, complete with its own distinctive pursuits like deep-sea fishing and hunting. The Greener light harpoon gun left this aquatic habitat with an indelible mark. The British gun manufacturer Greener created the Greener light harpoon gun, which was particularly intended for snaring enormous marine creatures, as opposed to conventional whaling gear. This cannon's design seeks to provide a more humane and effective method of capturing animals. The harpoon cannon featured a breech-loading system rather than relying on raw force, allowing mariners to fire a specially made harpoon attached to a rope. They were able to haul in their fish thanks to a cutting-edge mechanism, which made the harpoon lighter and more effective than conventional hand-thrown harpoons. Despite not being a weapon of war in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, fishermen and whalers frequently employed the Greener light harpoon gun as a vital tool for trade and survival. Noel Caplock revolver. The revolver, sometimes known as the Noel Cap's lock revolver, was a fascinating and awkward weapon that lived up to its peculiar name. This Pierre Noel-designed pistol has a capped lock mechanism with a cylinder axis that is horizontally aligned and perpendicular to the barrel. However, it is unknown why this unusual design decision was made. The clumsiness of the revolver revealed its complexity. The protruding cylinder was awkward to manage and frequently snagged on objects, obstructing fluid motion. The loading process was a difficult task in and of itself, comparable to a separate project. Remove the cylinder from the frame, fill it with caps and bullets, and then replace it. However, the gun's design prevented quick and smooth reloading, making it inappropriate for taking prompt action in a critical situation. The 0.9 caliber bullets shot from the revolver's 3.5-inch long barrel had just mediocre performance, therefore its power was also inadequate. Number 06. Leg peg gun. During the Wild West era, there were several instances of inventive and peculiar weaponry created for self-defense, or as covert weapons. One such odd innovation was the leg peg gun, a handgun deftly concealed inside a prosthetic leg. This innovative device provided a covert and unexpected way to conceal a concealed firearm for self-defense. The leg peg pistol was often a tiny one-shot handgun fitted inside the hollow chamber of a wooden or metal prosthetic leg. At first glance, the weapon's barrel was expertly concealed as a component of the peg, making it nearly impossible to differentiate from a conventional wooden leg. The shooter might move around without calling attention to themselves if they wore the prosthetic leg as part of their regular clothing. One of the primary advantages of the leg peg cannon was its capacity to surprise adversaries. The shooter may rapidly remove the prosthetic leg in the event of a surprise attack, exposing the concealed weapon. This element of surprise could provide the carrier with a crucial edge in a potentially fatal situation. The fake leg peg gun is used by people who intended to protect themselves covertly, such as gamblers, travelers, or undercover law enforcement personnel. If the shooter wore the prosthetic limb as part of their usual apparel, they would be able to move around without drawing notice to themselves. The leg peg cannon's ability to surprise opponents was one of its main benefits. In the event of a surprise attack, the shooter may quickly remove the prosthetic leg, revealing the concealed weapon. The carrier may gain a critical advantage thanks to this element of surprise in a potentially catastrophic circumstance. People that wanted to conceal their protection, like gamblers, travelers, or undercover law enforcement officers, employ the false leg peg gun. Number 05, Cochrane Turret Revolver. Yet another talented gunsmith. The Cochrane Turret Revolver was created by John Cochrane, who approached weapon development from an unusual viewpoint. This unique revolver had a cylinder that rotated around a vertical pivot. Practical use was complicated by the requirement to remove the cylinder in order to reload. Additionally, the revolver couldn't fit into a flat holster, and 2 rounds were always pointed in the direction of the shooter, posing safety concerns. Cochrane, on the other hand, raised the bar for discomfort. After each shot, the shooter had to manually cock the gun once more before firing. The Cochrane Turret Revolver was unusable for daily use because of this laborious process, and it makes sense why it was never popular with the broader public. Cochrane only sold 150 copies of this masterpiece because only collectors were interested in it. Despite the idea's lack of commercial success, Cochrane did not completely abandon it. He continued to innovate, developing different weapons based on the turret design, including a drum rifle and ultimately a field gun. Unexpectedly, he sold the patent for his turret design to a Turkish gunsmith who bought it to profit from his ingenuity. The turret-based artillery system, however, was never manufactured. They were required to resolve the issues and potential concerns since Cochrane decided to sell the patent to a Turkish gunsmith. Number 04, Lancaster. 4. Barrel shotgun, in terms of odd firearms from the Wild West period. The 4-barreled Lancaster shotgun is unique in its class. Charles Lancaster, an English gunmaker, created a magnificent handgun with a novel twist on the concept of multiple shots, which in the late 19th century was gaining popularity. With 4 parallel barrels, mostly in 20 gauge, the Lancaster 4-barreled shotgun initially resembles a handgun rather than a shotgun. Lancaster has a special operating mechanism in addition to having a lot of barrels. The Lancaster was a breech-loading gun with an easy-to-load break-action design that resembled a double-barreled shotgun. The firing system of the Lancaster was also remarkable. A rotating striker was used by the Lancaster. With each trigger pull, the striker rotated to the next barrel, allowing the operator to easily fire 4 bullets in a row without using separate triggers for each barrel. Number 03, Remington Model 95. Recall the scene in the movie where Django, who appeared to be unarmed, produces a cute little double barrel. It was a double Derringer Type 95, a truly outstanding weapon. This weapon had, despite its diminutive size, given that the 1873 Army Colt had a muzzle velocity of only 650 feet per second, 41 caliber cartridges were necessary. This is really quite amazing. Before needing to reload, this little pistol could fire twice from each barrel. For the double barrel, you had to unlock the barrel lock, rotate the barrels upward, insert the cartridges, and then rotate the barrels back down. This Derringer is a 2-shot single-trigger weapon because all of these stages produced a total of 2 bullets. Either you successfully hit the target the first time, or you were in grave danger. Surprisingly, the handgun was devoid of a trigger guard because the trigger could be brought to readiness by cocking the rifle and was placed within the frame fins when not in use. The gun, which was made to be concealed, quickly gained popularity among gamblers, women, traders, travelers, and anybody else trying to defend themselves from an unplanned attack. Number 02, Henry Rifle. One of the most well-known revolutionary weapons of the American West is the Henry Rifle, one of the earliest successful lever-action repeating rifles with extraordinary rapid-fire capability at the time. This weapon bears the name of its designer, Benjamin Tyler Henry. The Henry Rifle had a tubular magazine that contained 15 rounds plus 1 in the chamber and was a .44 caliber lever-action breech-loading weapon. This gave the user a substantial firepower edge during a time when the majority of rifles were single-shot muzzle loaders. The rifle was significant because it used metallic cartridges in addition to a repeating mechanism, which, in the middle of the 19th century, was a comparatively new design element. The Henry Rifle was an innovative advancement in firearm technology and an incredibly effective weapon because of this clever mix of features. Bank Teller's Rifle. The mounted revolver used by the bank teller is a fascinating and unique firearm that you might not have seen before. The lack of a grip and frame on this unique 20-shot firearm deviates from the traditional revolver design. As an alternative, it features groves for mounting to a wall or counter and a trigger with an eyelet for attaching a piece of rope or wire. This amazing device was placed on purpose in banks, mounted on desks, walls, or both, with the barrel facing the door. In certain cases, 2 of these mounted revolvers were used to cover a broader area. This unique arrangement's straightforward purpose was to deter potential robbers and provide an additional degree of security in a hazy and oftentimes unpredictable environment. In the event that an unwelcome customer entered the bank, the teller would be prepared to take action. One way to fire this mounted revolver was to put a covert pedal under the desk. While shooting the pistol and stopping the criminals in their tracks, while stepping on the pedal, the teller would hold out their hands, smile, and project an innocent appearance. We've come to the end of today's episode with that final item on the list. Which of the Wild West's weapons surprised you the most? Do let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up. It allows YouTube to suggest similar videos to you. Thanks for watching. We hope to see you at the next one.